All right. We are at the Governance and Ethics Committee meeting. I would like to read are we recording now? Okay. I'd like to read this first before we start the meeting. This meeting will be recorded. The Zoom application will notify you that this meeting is being recorded. Please press continue on the Zoom application to stay in the meeting. Use the raise your hand feature in Zoom when you would like to speak on an item, and also to lower your hand when you are finished speaking. Please unmute when called to speak and mute yourself when you are done speaking. If you are calling in by phone, identify yourself by name before speaking on an item. Press *9 on your phone to raise and lower your hand. Press *6 if you are participating by phone to unmute. Okay, I would like to call this meeting to order at 10:05 a.m. The meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee on Thursday, October 30th, 2025. Maria, could you do the roll call, please?
Chair Jane.
Yes. Here.
Committee Member Shahal.
Present.
And Committee Member Park.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one item on our consent calendar. That is approval of the September 8th, 2025 Governance and Ethics Committee meeting minutes. I believe there are some amendments that were made by staff for this. And I'm going to try to find those. Here we go. All right. I had informed city staff of these two items. Under the section call to order and roll call, there is an error after present. Should list member Raj Chahal as not the chair and Chair Suds Jain as chair, not member Jain. The second item I noted to staff was for the review and approval of the amendments to the council policy 043 and 006. We had a discussion about the per diem and a discussion about if you didn't have a receipt that you could essentially be covered under per diem. So this was not in the minutes, but we did have a long discussion about it. And so I thought it was important that it be reflected in the minutes that we had a discussion of that. So those are my amendments to the minutes. If anyone else would like to comment on the minutes, but those changes will be amended. Member Chahal.
Yeah. On some other item also, it was mentioned Chair Chahal, as you mentioned in the first item. So that correction is to Member Chahal and Chair Suds Jain.
Okay.
Rule on item 1, item 2 on the voting, it is matched.
Okay, and so is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Passes unanimously. Now we move on to public presentations. I don't see anyone here in the chambers. Is there anyone online?
Chair Jane, we have a hand raise for Wanda Buck. Hold on a second.
Okay. Wanda, go ahead.
Good morning, Wanda Buck. Good morning, Chair, council members on this committee and the staff. I ask, why isn't the establishment of a new ethics program voted for in 2024 to be presented in 2025, not on today's agenda or many previous ones? At least one of you has mentioned a possible special meeting regarding this matter. I was surprised and disappointed to not see it on today's agenda. Also, I wonder why the subject and frequent and urgency of ticket provisions for events and payment thereof. A better appearance would be having others also give input rather than just the potential ticket recipients. This seems like just one more reason to have a separate new ethics committee made up of more than council. And with all due respect and appreciation for your hard work and time, which I really mean, can't you imagine how this looks to your citizens looking from the outside in? And I ask of you, trick or treat.
Thank you, Wanda. I'm not going to comment on this because we don't generally comment on public presentations, but I would like to ask the city manager to explain the situation with our consultant who was hired to work on how we might establish a special ethics committee.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Jane. Javon Grogan, City Manager. As the committee knows, the city hired a consultant to undertake a two-part review of ethics. One was a review of all of our ethics documents. That has been complete, and there was a presentation of that several months ago. The second effort is to look into the possibility of establishing an ethics committee, look at other communities, conduct benchmarking. That item was actually scheduled for a prior meeting. If memory serves me correctly, the consultant was sick. That item is now scheduled to come forward, and your December meeting is at December 2nd. Am I correct on that? Yes, at your December 2nd meeting. Oh, it's December 1st meeting. So on December 1st. So the consultant will come back with her report. The committee then will have a discussion and a potential direction at that meeting, or additional follow-up questions that either staff or the consultant will research based on your direction.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else online?
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, now we can move on to our general business. We have, I will ask the city manager if we want to do item number 3 ahead of item number 2. I know that our city attorney has a hard stop, and I know that we need action, I guess, on number 2, but I think the gift policy will have robust discussion. So I didn't know if we wanted to rearrange those.
Sure, Chair Jane, staff is agreeable to that. We have 2 items, and I think both will take roughly an hour. If we can cut off the gift item at 11 o'clock, just to give us enough time to get through the ticketing policy. And I do know that the gift item is agendized for a discussion, presentation from the city attorneys, and then a discussion. And so no action is planned for today. No concerns with moving that ahead of the ticketing policy.
Okay, so I will move item number 3 ahead of item number 2. So we will have a discussion on the council policy 050, gifts to elected and appointed officials. I believe there's a staff presentation.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jane. Next slide, please. What we're trying to get today on this item is really your initial feedback on the current gift policy. In our review of it, in my review of it, as these issues come up, and this is why it made its way onto your work plan, there are some provisions, there that are even, confusing to us, how it interacts with state law, what the local provisions aren't as clear, as it could be. And so we want to talk to you, about that, at least generally, at this meeting. And then, of course, consider whether or not, we have a local gift policy at all, because other jurisdictions, do it differently. And so to get towards those questions, I want to talk about first the kind of the background of the policy, how we got to the current form of the policy. We'll identify some key questions and some factors to consider as you contemplate how to direct, us in coming back to you with either an updated policy or some different approach. And then we'll seek your discussion and direction on that. So again, this is not intended to be definitive, but more broaching the issue and soliciting your feedback on how you'd like us to approach. Next slide, please. So as background, the slide to catch up. There we go. Your council policy, Council Policy 050, gifts to elected and appointed officials, was, as I indicated, identified for review and possible revision as part of the committee's work plan. And the most recent gift policy update occurred back in 2018. At that time, changes were made to focus the policy on direct donations or gifts to officials as opposed to the city itself. Previously, that had been combined. It added a list of factors to be considered by city officials in deciding whether or not to accept gifts. There was an explicit prohibition on gifts from lobbyists. And then it required that any gift accepted actually of less than $50 be disclosed at a public meeting. So as you know, under your Form 700, state law requirements, gifts above $50 must be actually formally disclosed on your Form 700. But this policy went further and said gifts below $500 actually had to be, depending upon the official, but as it applied to city council members, actually announced by you, at a city council meeting. Next slide. The process and for taking up that update was a little disjointed. The original proposal that also went through governance in 2017, but came before the council in 2018, was for updates to a policy that covered both donations to the city and gifts to individual city officials. I think rightly so, the council recognized that those were very different things, and so they directed that two separate policies be created. The policy for donations to the city, the thing we're talking about here, I'm sorry, the policy for donations to the city was tabled to be taken up separately, and it was actually taken up separately in October. And the updates to the gift policy, again, gifts to elected and appointed officials, was brought back at the next meeting. At that meeting, there was a red line of changes presented to the council. I'm not sure why it got as muddled as it did. Maybe as a result of separating, those two policies, but the red line really was not an accurate red line of what was presented and ultimately approved. And I think maybe as a result, I've got to look at the meeting again. A number of the changes that were proposed to the policy that would have been helpful. For example, provisions that indicate that the state law references would be updated as state law changed, as opposed to merely stating what the state law was. Were ultimately excluded from the final adopted version. So as a result, what was adopted is a little confusing. It's a combination of references to state law and some local rules where it's not clear which was which, and there was not a clear provision for having this policy keep up with whatever the state law changes would be. So you've got a couple of what I've identified as questions before you. The first discussion question on the next slide is, does the city need its own local gift policy for elected and appointed officials, or should it instead refer to applicable state laws and other local policies? And there are some factors to consider with this on the next slide. First of all, most of the terms of the city's existing gift policy are restatements of applicable state law. So there really isn't anything new, or there are things that are new that added, but most of it is not new. And when you talk about what all the state laws rules are, a number of you know this, I know you become by necessity scholars of it yourself. The rules are detailed and they're complex and they're hard to summarize, in a policy. So there are perils with attempting to say, hey, here's what the state law is and here's what you should follow, because it won't be a complete, reference to the state law. And it might make it hard to use that as a way of compliance. There are good summaries out there about what the state law is. And in fact, thank you, Maria tracked this down and attached it to the current FPPC fact sheet is actually attached to your RTC. Many pages long, and certainly many pages longer than the policy, your current gift policy itself, but that's a very useful tool for reference. And of course, your AB 1234 training materials that we put together are also another good reference, again, but hardly the full brunt and summary of the rules themselves because they're extensive. Approaches vary amongst other jurisdictions on how to deal with this, the extensive state laws and a desire to have local, rules as well, ranging from the mere referral to state laws or attempts to summarize the state law and or the addition of more stringent local rules. So we've not done extensive benchmarking on this, but there really is a range of approaches on how to localize, if you will, rules about gifts. There are existing city rules that apply. For example, our Code of Ethics and Values talks about this, and I'll refer to that in a second. And there's also a local CMD, city manager's directive that applies to city employees that we'll talk about. And having, what the policies are for elected and appointed officials align and be resonant of the rules that apply to employees also certainly makes some sense. Another factor to consider, of course, though, is public expectations and perception. The fact that you have local gift rules now, the idea that you would maybe be perceived as doing away with those, even if your intent was good. Hey, we already have extensive state laws. Let's refer to those state laws. Could be perceived as you going away from, an ethics standard that you yourselves adopt and imposed upon yourselves. So there's a number of things to consider about in considering this discussion. Question one: do we really need local rules? Next slide, please. I talked about what other jurisdictions do. This is just to give you a quick sample of that. Palo Alto, for example, has no specific local rules on gifts that I found in their summary of their policies. They defer to state law and they provide some connections and links to those state law resources, but they don't endeavor to create their own local rules. It's not right, wrong, or otherwise. It's just what Palo Alto chooses to do. Sunnyvale, like a lot of jurisdictions, is really a hybrid. They've got a formal gift policy, but it's really largely a restatement of state law. They've got a code of ethics that provides a statement that elected officials should not take advantage of their positions to access benefits not available to the public and should refrain from accepting gifts that would compromise or appear to compromise their judgment. So they've got kind of a mixture of references and some of their own statements about that. And then San Jose, also a hybrid. They've got some pretty extensive summaries of rules, but they mostly refer to state laws, and it's not entirely clear to me in looking at that, again, what is a state law and what the local rule is. Next slide, please. In terms of the city's existing policies, I've mentioned them already. Again, this is above and beyond the gift policy that we're talking about. The City of Santa Clara Code of Ethics and Values does touch on this issue. As you all know, all elected and appointed officials are required to subscribe to this code, even though it's not a formal ethics code and it's more guidelines, as part of everyone's onboarding including Javon's and mine, and other designated employees, you're asked to acknowledge and subscribe, to these rules. These rules include 8 core values. One of these values is I will be ethical. And one relevant example of how ethics looks in practice is this statement. I will make impartial decisions free of bribes, unlawful gifts, narrow political interests, and financial or other personal interests that impair my independence of judgment or action. So it clearly gets at the whole idea between, for state regulations that are very detailed on gifts, but talks about not accepting unlawful gifts, with the idea being that, hey, there may be lawful gifts that could be accepted. And in fact, that is true under state law as well. I mentioned the existing CMD, again, the city manager's directive 67. This imposes actually very strict limits on city employees. I won't go into the details of that. That's not really within your domain, but something to think about. In fact, the current restriction on city employees is that, of course, gifts are discouraged and certain ones are prohibited, especially when they might be from vendors, that the city's working, with, because of the obvious both appearance and possibility of conflicts of interest there. But the actual cap on what city employees can accept of any kind of gift is $20. So meaningfully lower than what the state law limit is, which I think is currently over $600. It was $590. It might be up to $620, $630. Now you actually prohibits any acceptance of any gift of $20 or less. Again, neither here, not good, bad, or otherwise. Strict rules about gifts, make sense. But just pointing that out is what the existing city policy is. So the next slide, which is your discussion question 2. So discussion question 1, if you remember, is, hey, what is the value of having a local, gift policy at all? Does that make sense? Discussion question 2 basically says, look, if we answer that question in the affirmative, we should have at least some local gift policy. How should it be modified? Some of the things that we identified for the next slide here that at a minimum, should be looked at is we should clarify if the policy applies to the city manager and the city attorney. It talks about, in a somewhat ambiguous way, being applied to elected and appointed officials, but it appears to refer to appointed officials as people on boards and commissions and not necessarily the city manager and myself. So is it intended to apply to us or not? That should be made clear one way or the other. It also should clarify if the state law references are intended to change with state law. As I mentioned, back in 2018, in the draft that was presented, there were actually built-in provisions that weren't ultimately adopted that had this policy in effect keeping up with state law. If state law got more strict, if the exceptions were changed, if the limits were increased, this policy would adapt to those to the extent it was intended to. The ultimate version that was adopted didn't do that, I don't think intentionally. And so if we end up with a policy that's updated, we would recommend that be made clear and in fact, even potentially give, so it doesn't have to keep coming back to this committee or council, to the extent your intent is that it keep up with state law, that city staff be delegated the authority to make appropriate changes to it so that it in fact does keep up with state law and aligns with state law. As always, as you know, when I look at things, we all look at things, there's any number of different cleanup and modifications required where their language is ambiguous or duplicative. One of the challenges, I think, of the structure of our policies is it has a purpose section, it then has a policy section, it then has a procedure section. The way they're outlined, there's a lot of duplication there. There really isn't often a separation between what the policy is and what the procedure is. And so a cleanup of wording, and language in that is certainly warranted. And there's another, again, which I think is a little bit of an outlier provision that this group may want to look at, which is modifying the current public meeting disclosure requirement for gifts below $50. I've not seen that happen while I'm here. It may just entirely be possible that no one's accepting any gifts, from anybody of any value. But the idea of a public disclosure by council people at the end of meetings of any gifts that were received below $50 warrants some looking at. And if there in fact is their desire and the intent to keep that, we should make it a little bit more clear about how that would work. And finally, to the extent that changes are made with this provision, I know the city manager's office is undergoing as much as we have time to do that, like you're going over your policies, a review of all the CMD, policies to make sure they all make sense. It would make sense probably to have some more clear alignment between what the standards are that apply to elected officials and apply to employees. And if there's differences, make sure that that's clear and it's purposeful as to why it's different, because the circumstances, can be different between what the kinds of gifts that you might have to analyze how to deal with, and the kinds of gifts and situations that employee might have to deal with. So recommendation is, again, just for purposes of today, with at least the next half hour that we've got, I think that's a good, break point. Provide input on the existing gift policy and direct us to return how, with what you want us to return with, in consideration of all the different factors. I know there wasn't a lot of benchmarking done. I know this is not a detailed dive into, the gift policy itself. And if you want that additional information, which we won't necessarily have time to talk about, or I might not be ready to talk about, today, that can be something you also direct, me to come back with. Hey, in order for me to really fully understand this and take action on this, I would like, more benchmarking. I'd like more understanding of how the local rules, relate with the state rules. So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you to follow up.
Okay, very good. I have a lot of comments, but I'll ask my fellow committee members if they have comments. Member Park. No, go ahead. Okay, Member Chahal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, City Attorney. I know that both FPPC covers the campaign contribution part of it, and there have been big controversies in City of Santa Clara for independent expenditure. I would like to include the clarification of independent expenditure in our policy, like what control does a person for or against independent expenditure is being made, what are the control, and what they don't play any role, or whatever it is. So a clear definition or clarification of that should be included on that. My other question is, let's say elected official or whosoever this policy applies to is in his or her professional job is in Santa Clara, and during their professional career outside of the city, if they get I know Form 700 requires us to submit, if you do business of more than $10,000 with any of the customer, you have to list all those customers, basically, right? So does this policy also include any gift a company receives from any of their vendors or any of their customers into their, as a professional carrier, basically, the company receives that. So I want clarifications on that. So those are, for the time being, those are my couple of questions and suggestions.
I have a lot to say about this.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you wanted to do questions first,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
and then
go ahead and
comments and
answer
then
that.
public. Yeah, so,
We're not gonna follow the council policy.
okay, yeah, but I was asking how you wanted to approach it. Did you want me to answer
Not a
those-
council policy,
ahead.
it is
those questions?
a tradition, it's not a policy.
That's true. It's not a policy. It expired. Okay. go
It's
ahead.
actually not,
You
the
can
current,
respond to,
yeah, the current protocol you're under actually does govern this, but it's in the discretion of the chair on how to manage questions. That actually is what it,
But there is no
That-
policy that states that it's grounds of question.
you're right. The policy says it's at the discretion of the chair, yeah, of the particular group.
It makes
Yeah.
that very
Okay.
clear. Discretion and policy are two very different things.
The policy says it's at the discretion of the chair, so in this
That's
case, it
correct.
aligns.
So there's a policy, but the policy
Why
is
don't we
not
proceed,
rounds
because
of
we don't
questions.
have very much time.
No, but I want to
We'll
make this
go-
very clear because this is
I
very important
understand,
because this is
Kevin, we
used
understand.
in
We're
support
going to
of
answer the
of a
question.
Yeah, so.
specific.
And we've talked about that. We can have all sorts of conversations about that. But yes, in response to the specific questions asked, boy, you've raised a big one. There is a whole different, as you know, provision in the city's code regarding supplemental local rules regarding independent expenditures. That's also something that I've had to interpret and advise, the city clerk on. That needs a lot of work. There's a lot of ambiguity, both in the definitional structure and who's responsible for enforcement. That begs a lot of questions there. So I appreciate that as something that also needs to be taken up. But it is separate from the thing that's in front of you now. So if that's something this group wants to add to work plan, happy to try to get to that and come back and talk about that, because I've had that. There's even more to that, I think, that needs attention than with this gift policy. In terms of whether this applies, to your business activities, it really is intended to get at, and by its terms, gets at actions that or potential for gifts that are provided to you in your capacity as an elected official. There are actually some carve-outs of things that are gifts that you might receive in a separate, independent business, relationship, or familial, relationship that under both state law and our summary of local law aren't covered by this policy. There, of course, is potential overlap, right? If to the extent any of you have business interactions with people that have business, before the city and doesn't qualify for that, unrelated, to your conduct or exercise of your duties as an elected official, that's something you would need to look at. And so, sorry, that's a little bit of a murky answer. It gets at you in this capacity. It does not intend to get at things that are in your business capacity, but there's potential for overlap. And that's where it's good for you to raise those issues with us. If there's any ambiguity about what the nature of the gift is. And we're always happy to assist you in a solicitation of input from the FPPC as to what kind of gift, it might be and whether it's exempt or not.
Member Chong.
Yeah. So on the independent expenditure, why I raised that issue, because it was in these chambers itself, it was misconstrued and it was politicized. That's why I'm saying it. I know you are mentioning it's a separate topic basically, but it was construed as a gift to some of the elected officials as for or against what I'm saying independent expenditure was made. So I want some clarification to incorporate it in our policy from that perspective. That's my, you may not have a full details of that, but some perspective that independent expenditures are controlled by an independent entity outside the purview of control of the elected official or whosoever this policy is applied to.
I understand.
That's the only.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. To the extent there's not that this policy doesn't cover it, it should say what does and make a reference to what you would look at in order to determine that. So I think that's a very good point. As you also know, and you've been trained on a little bit, campaign contributions for gifts and financial interest purposes used to not be viewed, as gifts and things you needed to worry about. As a result of the Levine Act, they now are. And so during election season, where in fact you might be receiving campaign contributions, that is now something that's a financial interest that needs to be analyzed from a conflict of interest standpoint. So I think you're right. All these policies benefit from saying both what they govern and what they don't govern, with appropriate references to other policies that would govern a particular circumstance. I think that's helpful and would be another appropriate modification to this if that's the direction you go.
Okay, with respect to the Levine Act, on the VTA board, there are a number of elected officials that did receive campaign contributions, and they disclose them at the meetings. So we have not been doing that. I've never heard anyone disclose that at our meetings, but
Yeah, and we've, and if I may, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think we need to institutionalize that a little more here, like other jurisdictions have. We were attentive to that during your most recent election season, and we're actually even looking at campaign filings in order to assist individuals that were campaigning at the time with that analysis. Obviously, we just assist. You're on your own for cognizance. You're really responsible for complying that with your own. But I think that should be more formally institutionalized, with disclosures. And that's another item on our list of things to add to your agendas in order that everyone's made aware that that type of disclosure is necessary, and potential recusal. Right, based on the financial interest exceeding now what used to be a $250 limit. I think they've actually moved it up to $500 now as a basis for determining whether or not there's a conflict under financial interest. So also good point.
okay, I actually think that these gift policies should apply to pretty much everyone who's doing a Form 700 in the city. That would include the city manager and city attorney. The gift policy is extremely complicated, and I've been going to council meetings for over 10 years, and I have never heard a council member disclose that they received a T-shirt at an event. If you are supposed to disclose every gift, I would have been hearing lots of cases of people disclosing T-shirts, okay? And when we go to ribbon cuttings of new restaurants, often we're given free food there as part of the ribbon cutting. I have never heard anyone disclose that. There was a case where there's a restaurant, an Indian restaurant, Swaraj, where we got a nice meal when they had the opening, and I had to go after the event and go pay for my meal. And I think a number of my fellow council members did that. I'm not sure if all of them did. And so, and recently I went to the Bay Area Host Committee. They had a 1 year to go kickoff event at PayPal. And I had to ask Ruth Shikata, I said, what is the value of this? Because I have to put this on my Form 700. I would imagine that there were a lot of electeds there, and probably very few of those electeds disclosed that. And I had to say, and this is where it gets complicated, because what are you disclosing? Are you disclosing the value of the food or the value of the experience? If it's not a ticketed event with a value on a ticket. So the Bay Area Host Committee, she said that the value of the event was $178, of which $50 is food and beverage. So what would I disclose, okay? And then there are a number of nonprofits like Community Seva. At first they said, we would like you to come to this event to represent as an elected official, to highlight our event, and your ticket is complimentary. And I'm like, no, because you guys are selling tickets to attendees. So I paid $250 for my ticket to attend that event. I would like to clarify whether it's a nonprofit. Can I accept a free ticket to the event because they really want electeds to be there and participate in their events? I mean, electeds are recognized whenever you go to these events. So another example is that sorry. So the issue is, okay, so we have lobbyists, and the current policy for lobbying activities, section 2.15.130, says gifts clearly forbids any lobbyist to deliver, sorry, I'm having trouble with my thing here. Okay, to deliver or cause to be delivered any gift to any city official and for any city official to accept any gift from a lobbyist. So we get invited to events at the stadium. One event was like the training. We got to go see the training of the 49ers. There's value to that because only certain people get elected, but the 49ers are lobbyists. So can I accept anything from a lobbyist? And then our lobbyist policy is just completely broken. There are people who are lobbyists, lobby me all the time, that are not registered lobbyists. And I've asked the city clerk, it's like, how do you go after these people? And there's no clear way to go after them because you can't prove that they spent 10 hours lobbying. You can't prove that they spent over $1,000 lobbying. So our lobbyist policy is completely broken. And so how do I'll give you an example. So Edge Court is not a lobbyist. They're not a registered lobbyist. They had a ribbon cutting of their facility and we got trinkets from them. I didn't hear of any council member that disclosed that. They're not lobbyists, but clearly they sponsor a lot of events. They talk to council members. They're not lobbyists. But I believe they should be lobbyists, but then I couldn't accept any trinkets from them. Okay, there are a lot of lobbyists there that have events. There's Canyon Snow. I went to their event and I got a mug, right? Could I have accepted the mug from them? I mean, this policy is completely full of holes. I don't understand how we're going to fix this. Another example of something is I went to the Peninsula Cities event. They have an annual dinner. And at the end of the night, you're supposed to look under your chair, and if there's a ticket there, you win an induction stove. So I happened to get the induction stove. So I put that on my Form 700. So is that a gift? I don't know. Is that something I need to report at a council meeting? So there's a lot of edge cases, you might say. And I don't know how we're going to resolve those things, but I would like to know what the policy on raffle. I've won raffles and I've turned back the raffle. I'm like, I can't accept this. I'm an elected official. So, and then the Form 802s, I know I've been to as part of VTA. So I'm on the VTA board and I'm on the NCPA board. We go to conferences and we get lots of trinkets and gifts and things. Are those to be disclosed? Because I'm a member of those agencies, but I'm also a member of the council. The VTA, they sponsored an event at the African American Community Services Organization. It's a table. And I said, hey, I'll go as your representative. And they're like, yeah, this is not, you don't have to buy a ticket because we're going to file an 802 form for you. But I don't know if the city of Santa Clara is filing regularly 802 forms for our council members. So those are just a lot of examples of where often you go to an event and they don't even know what the value of the event is. So what am I supposed to put down as the value of the event? So a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I might respond to that, I know you're asking and hopefully not expecting me to answer all the questions because the rules are complicated. Not what this meeting is intended to get at. I think what your comments highlight, though, is that the rules are already complicated. And if we're going to make local rules, we need to be very clear about how those relate to the rules that already exist. if we're going to have a set of local rules, we need to have those be clear and have enforcement mechanisms for them and a clear understanding of how those work, because otherwise they're just on paper, right? And while they look good on paper, it doesn't look good if there's confusion, compliance issues, and uncertainty. In fact, it actually can make the issue worse if in fact you've got rules that people don't fully understand and are hard to interpret and enforce. So I don't know where that takes us so much that when you're talking about what to do with this area of gifts, you really got a whole potential range of approaches. One is a deferral to state law. The other is, a deferral to state law, but with some very clearly articulated local rules, that may be warranted under these circumstances. For example, rules around the 49ers, right, could be, a logical thing, right, to do in light of that, that their involvement in the community. Of course, everything in between that, outright prohibition on gifts all the way to, just pure deferral to state law. So interested in how you want to approach, that issue in light of the very good points you're making about how complicated the rules are and how hard they are to interpret. I will note with respect to Form 802s, the next item on your agenda regarding tickets and ticket distribution actually gets at that very subject in that context. And so hopefully that will add some value, at least in that arena, as to how that will work. I will answer one of your questions, but just generally with respect to when you get tickets from a nonprofit. In fact, that can be to a certain extent, if you get it directly from the nonprofit, something that's not viewed as a financial interest for the same reasons you said, that it's considered a kind of an important thing for nonprofits to be able to get, local officials to go to that. However, if you're given, a ticket from a third party, say a developer buys a table and you're now invited to go to that event with the table, that is different. And that is not qualified for the exemption under the gift rules. And that would need to be fully disclosable. So you tendered a lot. I can't answer all those questions. Definitely interested though in kind of macro input from the group as to how you want, what additional information you want and how you'd like me to come back on this gift policy.
Yeah, I am very, very opposed to rules that are not particularly enforced. I'll just give you an example. This is why the state of California got rid of jaywalking, because police could selectively enforce. I mean, everyone jaywalks. I jaywalk. I don't go to the corner to cross the street. But if you had a case where this under $50 disclosure, and I didn't disclose that I got a t-shirt from somebody, then somebody would come after me, but maybe not go after somebody else on the council who did get the shirt. It could be politicized. So I think I'm leaning more towards just moving to state law rather than have our own local laws, because, every other city, we wouldn't be unique. Every other city follows state law pretty much. The under $50 rule, I have never seen anyone disclose that they received a t-shirt. So, and I can't imagine every councilman person has not received a shirt at one point from, a cancer run or a nonprofit. Thank you. The manager.
Sure. Just want to piggyback on a number of the comments from the city attorney and mention that some fair bit of your questions, probably about a half, relate to events. And we're going to get to those in the very next item, and really an attempt to align to what other cities do. I think in regard to your comment about extending the council's gift policy to all employees that file a 700, there's a fair number of employees that file 700. And so when we come back, I'd like the opportunity to work with the HR department and look into that and give you the understanding of the employees that that will cover, but also discuss some of the overlap with our existing rules and city managers' directives that governs employees, just to add a little bit more flavor to how we regulate employee conduct. We have mentioned as well the city manager directive that has a lower limit of $20. I will tell you that as we're looking into all of our city manager directives, that is one policy that we're looking at because it really excludes de minimis things like T-shirts and water bottles, things that, you know, I've heard from employees that they're attending events and frankly, everyone else at the event can accept the T-shirt or the water bottle and they're singled out and they're not able to do that. And so we're looking into that because we want our employees to be similarly situated. And also when there's a de minimis, as you said, trinket, that's not going to impact someone's decision-making ability to have that, especially when it's for causes like a cancer run or breast cancer awareness. You know, we want our employees to not be the only city official there that has to, you know, figure out how much that T-shirt costs and write the check for fear of having a employee job action. And so know that we're looking at that.
Okay, Member Park.
Yeah, so I understand all the issues that are brought forward. I think that they're all very good comments. I think that we have a big issue with intents versus details. I think that there is a, you know, like when we start talking about specific things like $50, we don't know what values of $50 are. I mean, there's public events where everyone's invited. There are events where we're invited. And I don't know if the public's invited. I say public there. There's events where we're not told what the costs are. And, you know, I mean, there's so many different things. And there are events where not taking a T-shirt, not taking a sign, a pin, a placard, something is seen as a very negative thing. Right. And I go to a lot of organizations where I'm part of this organization even before I was an elected official. The fact that I happen to be there as elected official and I'm announced as elected official, that's not the reason that I'm there, but it makes it seem like that's the reason I'm there. But I was a member of this organization before I was an elected official. These kinds of things really need to be, you know, kind of hammered out. I don't put myself in any raffles. I don't care if it's a convention. I don't care if it's a trade show. We just came back from the California League of Cities because if I won, first of all, I think somebody else should probably more deserving. But if I won, it's like, well, I don't want to have to deal with that, especially carrying it back on an airplane. But we definitely need to think about things. I also am leaning towards, I think we should not have specific policies unless we can justify why it's not a political addition, why it's necessary for the city of Santa Clara. I mean, it's possible that we could add carve outs, inclusions for the 49ers, but I don't know why we should treat them differently. I think at some point they should follow what the state requires and we should do the same. Every time I hear that we've got something that differs from what other cities do, I usually feel it's for very political reasons. The fact that the last change was made in 2018 makes me feel that, well, again, it's hard to shake this. I mean, we've got rules, we've got ordinances, we've got a code of conduct that we can't enforce. In fact, I would say that there are egregious examples of people not following that. Even without an ethics policy in the city, we have an ethics policy simply from the fact that we're elected officials. Right? This is something that's not addressed during campaigns where even if we don't sign an ethics pledge, we are as elected officials required to follow an ethics policy. Whereas we see that other candidates who are not elected officials, they can do whatever they want. We've seen this. We've seen outright lies. We've seen just terrible things. And at some point, you know, and we saw this in the last election where I don't necessarily sign the city's ethics pledge, but I'm going to sign this other ethics pledge, which doesn't go into any of the things, which talks about specific things that have nothing to do with ethics. They have a lot of things to do with policies. It doesn't make any sense. I would like to have a code of conduct, even if people don't follow it. We've had council members that won't even say hello, won't even greet other people, when it literally says we should be professional, you know, things like that. We've had council members outright lie in council meetings. I mean, I can take you to the DARE program in May 2022, when somebody said that the council cut the DARE program, and there was a clarification made the following June, where the staff response was, DARE is not in the jurisdiction is not under the jurisdiction of the council. And I'm thinking about this because we've attended multiple BRAVE graduations, which is a follow-on to the DARE program. And again, this council member stated programs were cut by this council. I can tell you exactly when it was. It was
Can you stay
Yes.
on that gift?
understood. But what I'm saying is, we've got a council issue that we just addressed where people want to remove conditions from a conditional use permit because, well, we can't enforce them. Like I am also against things that we cannot enforce. I think that if we're going to put something together, it should be something that everyone has to follow. There should be some consistency. And I think that where we are different, there should be a reason for why we're different other than, well, some people want this because, well, imagined ethics or other policies. I'm going to say I've heard people complaining about ethics. I've only heard 1 or 2 people complaining about ethics. When I talk to people about ethics on the street, most people are not concerned about the ethics complaints that the people that are demanding an ethics committee are talking about. These are very concerning to me. It's one of those things where I, a democracy fundamentalist, want to make sure that the people are heard, not 1 or 2 loud voices. In this case, I am really looking to supporting what everybody else supports. I do like stating our own policy and saying that our policy is basically the state policy. Here are some differences if there are any. If the state policy changes, I don't know that I want to do an automatic adoption of the changes. I think that should be a decision. I think that if there is something that causes the city to converge, I mean, because you never know what's going to happen. I think that maybe the adoption of the changes should be on a consent, something, but it should be something that's voted on so that people know, when or how something changed. Like, I just want a record of that. I mean, there's so many other questions. If I meet somebody and they buy my drink and I buy theirs, is that a gift? Is that a quid pro quo? I mean, what is that? I think at some point, these kinds of social, what I call, stilted social interactions, there should be some way to smooth those without having to be very, very, very awkward. Right.
And there are rules for that. There's a lot of rules for everything that talk about exemptions.
Understood. And I'm saying, rather than put out all these exceptions, I think that we should say, in general, this is what we try to do. Understanding that even if we have ordinances and guidelines, there are some that are just not going to follow that. I commend Councilmember Jane, Chair Jane, because I know he's one of the people that tries as hard as he can to follow the rules and still gets dinged or all these things, because I think that the types of complaints, the types of people that want to make these complaints, following the rules, it's very complicated. And I think that we should do what we can to remove the problems instead of just looking at how do we enforce, these specific things. We should be looking at both. It should not be just how do we make everything detailed and explicit, but it should also look at what are the interactions that we don't want to complicate, and we should think of it from that angle as well. There are so many things to think about here, but I'm gonna go with the people who are not ethical are not going to follow this policy anyway. The people who are ethical are going to go out of their way to try to make sure that these things are followed. And as a result, I want to make sure that the people who are trying to follow these policies aren't being dinged for trying to be honest. And I think most of the policies that we have that are used for attacks are exactly the kinds of policies which do not do that. They do not smooth interactions. They do not make it, they are there for as attack vectors. And I'd like to see that change.
So, Mr. Chair, I know you have to go to the public as well. And then I think I have a sense of what I might come back with. The city manager may have some comments as well, but I know we're wanting to jump on to the next item. We're past the 11 o'clock hour. So it may be a good time to go to the public. And then I have the city manager and I, it sounds like both have some thoughts on next steps.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I think the places where we want clarification would be ribbon cuttings. What do we do if food is provided at a ribbon cutting, if it's a, city-sponsored event or a Chamber of Commerce sponsored event. And, the raffle thing for the Peninsula Cities, everyone there wasn't elected. So would it be that no one could accept a raffle, item? There, and I agree when we have city employees that go to events and they're specifically singled out that they can't take the shirt or things, that is a problem for us. So I'm trying to get away from these city-specific events.
I hear, and I hear you on that. And my response to that, there's definitely a distinction between policy and what the rules are and training as to what those rules are, right? If you want to say, here's what the state law says, and in these various circumstances, here's what you would need to do. I don't think that's policy. I think that's us helping you in the circumstances you deal with all the time, understanding what the rules are that apply to you. It's a separate question of, do you want now a local rule that differs from state law?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing most of you say is that in general, the rules are complicated enough. Let's defer to state law. You'd like training and understanding on how those things apply to things that you need all the time. And that if we're going to have local rules, let's highlight and be clear about what those local rules are and why we have those local rules. And with that, as I'm trying to weave together a consensus, I can come back with something that looks like that. But again, don't want to jump ahead of public input and what your formal direction might be.
Okay, Kevin, your thing is on still. You have a comment? Okay. All right, we'll go to the public now. There's no one here in the chambers. Is there any member of the public online?
Yes, we have Wanda Buck with her hand raised.
Go ahead, Wanda.
Wanda Buck again, I might add, your one loud voice that is supposedly not representative of concern about ethics in this city. I actually take offense at that. And I'm sorry, when they have meetings at council and they wonder why people don't want to come to the meetings, there's that kind of feeling from those that do. Quite frankly, this is very, very complicated. I admire all of you for giving to our city. However, the citizens don't, they're busy with their own lives. And we do have an ethical problem in our city. I belong to many, many groups. You can't hear a group hardly talk. And I'm not talking about a formal meeting like the pool and the senior center. Groups that I belong to, that we don't have a reputation as a city that's really very ethical. Even my nephew in Santa Cruz knows about it. People in San Francisco know about it. And my concern is part of ethics is the perception of ethics. And we don't even have it right now. So I'm sorry, it's complicated, it's hard, it's the big stuff that should count. The media makes all this fighting back and forth. I'm tired of the divisiveness. And quite frankly, most of our country is tired of the divisiveness. So I hope you can simplify it. I sympathize with the difficulty. Some of it seems almost hardly worth not talking about, that you should be entitled to certain things and not have to worry about it. And the last thing, and again, with respect, but our city manager and our attorney, they are paid, they are staff. And it's all very difficult. So I'm listening with interest. I'm trying to be a good citizen. And I'm sorry for the downing of the public called me today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Wanda. Any other members of the public?
And Wanda, you have your hand raised. Did you?
Oh, no, I'm going to put it down. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on this item, I think staff has sufficient direction of what what we're interested in seeing? Okay.
Very good. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think if what I summarized just before we went to the public is accurate, that's what we'll work on and come back with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So there's no action on this item. We'll now move to item number 2, which is consideration and possible action on a proposed new council policy for ticket distribution to city officials. Is there a staff presentation?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Jane, members of the committee. Again, Javon Grogan, City Manager. We have prepared a proposed policy and a presentation for you with regard to a ticketing policy. I think, as you know, the city of Santa Clara does not have a ticketing policy. You will see benchmarking from other cities, or you will hear about benchmarking from other cities that do have ticket policies. We very much want to align with that. And I think in our prior discussion, a number of comments really centered around events, as well as the 802 form, which is a state form that really dictates when the city is a recipient, we have a duty to report. And that also takes some of the burden off of elected officials individually to report and provides for better tracking, vetting, and collective reporting of tickets. And so we want to talk about that, know that we are proposing a very comprehensive policy that provides things that are permitted, also provides for tickets that will explicitly not be permitted. It came up in our last presentation, but we are proposing to exclude any tickets from the 49ers for NFL games. We'll talk about that. With that, I know we will have a robust discussion, so I'll turn it over to Maria Lay, an assistant to the city manager, who will provide the presentation, and then myself, the city attorney, as well as assistant city manager Azevedo is here for a question.
Thank you, City Manager. So as mentioned, currently the City of Santa Clara does not have an official ticket distribution policy. So presenting to you the committee today is this item for consideration. The slideshow will just basically go over the background to why this item is being presented. In addition, for the draft proposed policy that we're bringing forth, I will share the purpose of the policy, as well as the guidelines and procedures that we have put together for your consideration. And finally, the recommendation to the committee. As background, as mentioned, we do not have currently an official ticket distribution policy. So we're bringing this forth for consideration. In advance of all the preparation for 2026 events and beyond, and also on a daily basis, we do already experience all the invitations to events and whatnot for elected officials. So the purpose is to really establish formal procedures for the acceptance and distribution of tickets or passes provided to the city. This proposed policy would ensure accountability that all ticket distributions are made for legitimate city-related public purposes, documented appropriately, and when appropriate, disclosed to the public through the FPPC Form 802 reporting process. Again, stated here is just the proposed purpose that's also in the draft policy, which would again establish guidelines for the acceptance and distribution of tickets or passes. And in the policy, it's referred to as tickets for both, received by the city for city officials, including council members, other elected officials, and employees designated by the city manager in compliance with FPPC regulations. Through our research, staff reviewed several other city ticket distribution policies, including City of San Jose, City of Mountain View, Oakland, Los Angeles, and San Diego, and among others. Common elements that were found in all these policies included defining ticket administrators in these agencies, where they would, again, define who would be a ticket administrator. Sometimes they had several in city departments. And also, it was clearly defined in these policies, the definitions for public purposes, where tickets and passes may be received by the city, and reporting procedures that are, again, aligned with FPPC regulation, other state laws. Some items to note: the City of Mountain View with the Shoreline Amphitheater, they, through their lease agreements, have the ability to receive a lot of premium tickets and tickets for their city box. And they have a lot of limitations set there for their council members on number of tickets they can accept per season, and also for employees. For City of San Diego, again, they have Petco Park, One of the other things they have in their policy was in the city's employee reward and recognition program, where they also are able to distribute tickets through that form. City of San Jose, as we know, has the Arena Authority. The Arena also will present tickets to the city. They also have a city suite, and they have a program there where they basically can issue to city departments for their ticket administrators, and that can be dispersed to employees and also to community members and city officials as well. This next slide illustrates the type of tickets or passes that the city may be offered. So here we have the city can purchase tickets or a table to an event. An example would be if the Triton Museum was celebrating their anniversary gala and there was an ability for the city to purchase a table. If the Business Journal was doing a event on the future of Santa Clara, and they also offered the city the ability to purchase a ticket or be a sponsor. Next, complimentary tickets to events, concerts, festivals from partners is an example. Tickets may be provided through our city venues. The convention center could be hosting a exhibit or a conference or a trade show that would offer some additional tickets to city officials. Levi Stadium could also offer special event tickets. It's important to note, though, that this policy excludes NFL games. Admission for recognition events, awards, or scholarship events for residents, businesses, volunteers. If there was a Chamber of Commerce event, which may have a ticketed value for something, those tickets could potentially be offered to the city. Again, tickets to concerts, festivals, and community celebrations held at our city-owned or regional venues. And that's if it's ticketed where there's a face value, but there's at times the Parade of Champions has their breakfast event in the morning, and there's a fee to attend the breakfast, but they could, again, provide some complimentary tickets to the city for distribution. And also invitations to regional, intergovernmental, or ceremonial functions hosted by partner agencies. There may be some ticketed events there. And in the policy, we also wanted to clearly define city-related public purpose. So in order for the city to accept certain tickets or passes, they could include but not limited to one of these public purposes. So it could be that it's for attendance at ceremonial occasions, for official welcoming of visiting foreign officials and dignitaries, our Santa Clara sister cities, our friendship cities, promotion of cultural, educational, recreational, and community events, any events for economic development, outreach, or planning, and again, promotion of any intergovernmental relations. And as stated before, recognition events for community, businesses, volunteers, students. Santa Clara University could be hosting an awards dinner or something that might be ticketed and would be something that could be an example. And of course, all the policy allows us to do redistribution of these tickets and passes to the public and city staff. And the proposed policy includes general provisions for all the tickets received by the city. And it states that the use of the city distributed tickets is a privilege and it's not a right. And tickets not accepted by a city official may be reassigned at the discretion of the ticket administrator with priority to city officials. And at times, family members may be able to receive tickets if appropriate. An example of this could be, there could be a huge community festival for an event next year, and they give us 100 tickets for a festival or a concert. And so this would give the ability to go to city officials. If they choose not to take it, then it would be redistributed by the ticket administrator, which is designated by the city manager. In addition, outside sources may not earmark tickets to specific individuals, so they can't really give the city a ticket and say, well, we only want these to go to these certain people. So that's part of the policy. Any benefits not associated with tickets are not covered under this policy and would require Form 700. And I think that is the questions about the gifts, souvenirs, VIP, things that are not part of the ticket. However, city officials may use the benefits included with the ticket if the entitlement includes, like if the ticket includes dinner, that then would be an opportunity where you could attend as a ceremonial function and you could accept the dinner because it's part of the entitlement of the ticket or pass. But again, the gift policy would have to cover other things that were not part of the entitlement of the ticket entry. Outside sources, again, I just covered that. And then the city shall not accept, and this policy explicitly excludes tickets received from the San Francisco 49ers for NFL games. Should any individual officials choose to accept such tickets, they have to comply with applicable laws and FPPC regulations. However, complimentary tickets to special events or to the 49ers Museum at the stadium are permissible and may be accepted by the city and distributed for a public purpose. And again, all these ticket distributions must comply with FPPC regulations and applicable laws. So this slide here outlines the procedure for the policy. Here, the ticket administrator would be defined as by the city manager or their designee. That would be a staff person. That would then be the person in charge of managing the receipt and the distribution of all tickets subject to this policy. The ticket administrator would be ensuring that tickets distributed serve a city-related public purpose. They would have to ensure that before accepting that they would serve a public purpose. Ensuring the tickets distributed pursuant to this policy are disclosed on the FPPC Form 802, which is attached to your report. And upon that, the ticket administrator would be responsible for completing the FPPC Form 802 and submit that to our city clerk for posting on the city website within the required timeframes, which are established by the FPPC regulations following the date of the event. And then we could, in a sense, put a dedicated web page where you could list all the FPPC Form 802. And some other cities had some good web pages like that. City of Oakland and City of Palo Alto were examples. So at this point, the recommendation is if the Governance and Ethics Committee approves the proposed policy with any of amendments and for further discussion, staff would then prepare this council policy to bring forth to the full council for consideration.
Thank you, Maria. And before we go back with the permission of the chair, I just want to give a few more examples. As Maria was talking, I sort of jotted down a few examples of things that have sort of come across our collective desks over the past few years. One of them was, for example, the Bay Area Host Committee hosted a Women in Sports Symposium and invited city staff and was willing to invite city officials. We actually passed on that because it was unclear if we could actually accept those tickets. We were concerned about the public perception. However, as you know, ensuring and being a part of women's athletics. We support women's athletics through BFC. Other cities attended, but our staff did not, right? And that was an effort that we passed on. There was an event where an organization really wanted city council members to attend. It was a ticketed event. They were willing to provide tickets complimentary. We were concerned about the perception of that. We didn't have a policy that governed that. And so the easy solution there was for the city to actually purchase a table, right? This happened to be the Triton event, but that was a case where the city actually did not have to purchase a table, but in lieu of having a policy and worried about public perception, we did purchase a table. But there are those events where council members are certainly invited. They would like council members or even some city staff to attend, and we think incorporating that in this policy would be appropriate. On the public side, there are events that happen at the stadium, and we're talking about non-NFL events that are not sellouts. And there is the possibility to negotiate with the promoters or through our convention center, our stadium manager when they're working on the stadium authority's behalf. As you know, for 6 months out of the year, non-NFL events are put on behalf of the public agency, the stadium authority. And for events that are not sellout, where there's not a sellout crowd, there is the ability to negotiate for those, but we don't have a policy that governs that, right? And we do know that there's been soccer matches and other events where even the promoter may want, for viewing purposes, the stadium more full. And so having a policy that governs that provides sort of clear guidelines on what occurs, we think is important. We know other cities do that. And we certainly have other city policies as we've discussed that cover that. On the employee side, I think similar to the stadium, I know employees that have worked to support the stadium for the last 10 years. and haven't been there, literally have not stepped foot in the building. And so what we're doing now is we're providing operational tours to a number of our employees. But certainly if there was the ability for complimentary tickets, that would be a employee benefit. Similar to there are events at the convention center where we have been offered complimentary tickets and have not accepted them. I will say that I've had the opportunity to go with the mayor who was speaking at a convention center event, and seeing the convention center fully dolled up with one of these amazing conventions that really takes it over is something that I do think council members and staff could benefit as we manage that facility. And so being able to take advantage of things like that is part of the reasons for the provisions in the policy. There are likely other examples that we can discuss. Thank you.
Okay, are there comments or questions from members? Member Chahal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Maria, for the presentation. Appreciate that. So I bring back some of the issues raised by Chair Jain on the gift policy. Like there's an intermingling of gift policy as well as the ticketed. And I think the difference is this one is only the tickets and the events organized by the city, or the city gets it, not us as a personal invitation. That's what Councilmember Jain was mentioning. Like if we as elected officials are invited to an event where they have a, let's say, entrance fee of $15 for others. So I'm trying to segregate these two things and I need some opinion from the city attorney, how we deal with that. Like basically, this one is because city manager is controlling it. You will be the administrator of all these tickets and everything. But when it comes to us as a person, we want some clarification on that. So there is an overlap. Like we get invited by the Consul General of India for Diwali celebration. They host a lunch or dinner, whatever. So where does that fall, basically, right? And I'm glad, city manager, you mentioned non-NFL events where you need to accommodate residents or the city staff or even the council. That does make sense when they have a not a fully filled up stadium and they need something that can be good for our residents also and as our staff also. So I just want a clarification on those like non-city controlled events and that will tie up to our gift policy basically. How do we deal with that basically? Because we are sometimes invited as elected officials.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll turn it over to the city attorney, but the key distinction here is the gift or the ticket would come to the city. Then the city has the requirement to fill out the 802 form, and then we are distributing them through a process that will be set up through the ticket administrator. Also important to note, the policy does exempt the provider of the ticket from designating which council member or person that they would like to attend. And so they are truly providing a ticket to the city, and the city would administer and distribute that out to the various parties. I'll turn it over to the city attorney to talk more about reporting and the difference between individual versus city.
And it's city's responsibility to put 802 on the website, right?
Yep. And that's the key thing. I mean, when it's given to the city, and it implies, with our policies, the city will file that document. That constitutes the necessary disclosure. You do not need to independently disclose it yourself under your Form 700 if it in fact is disclosed by the city. However, if it is, as you pointed out, a ticket that's to you, that is your responsibility to evaluate that gift, how the rules apply to it, and your disclosure obligation. The FPPC fact sheet is actually pretty good, for that. There's also contact information there for the FPC hotline. If you have a question for them, as you know, we're available and try to be helpful as well. When those are gifts, how to value that gift, what your disclosure obligation is. If it's not covered by our policy, falls under the general gift, state law gift requirements. And then it becomes your responsibility.
So the follow-up on that is sometimes you get invited as an elected official, right, to grace an occasion. And all others are paying whatever entrance fee of X dollars. And they say, oh, you don't have to pay because you are an elected official. So what happens in that case?
Sure. In that case, ideally, the ticket would be provided to the city.
No, I'm talking about non-city.
Oh, non-city.
Non-city.
If it's
Cities, I'm
not-
very good. I'm
Yeah.
appreciate that city takes care. We're not involved unless you tell us, oh, there's an open ticket, you go over there. That's fine.
So lawyers answer, it depends, right? If you are getting invited by a 501c3 entity and you get a ticket for you and another person, to go, that potentially qualifies for an exemption and does not constitute a gift. If it's not a 501c3 and there's value, to that ticket, that is something you would be, and you're invited in your capacity as an elected official, that is something you would need to evaluate and disclose yourself under your Form 700.
Okay, and does that mean, let's say Indian consulate inviting us for an event and they host a dinner or lunch? So should we ask them, hey, what's the cost of that lunch or
Yes.
dinner is? And then we,
Yeah, awkward, but necessary.
okay.
I think in those cases, with a ticketing policy, one of the things the city could seek to do is ask the provider, are they willing to provide enough tickets so that every council member could go? And then it would fall under the 802 policy. But if in fact a specific provider of a ticket wanted a specific council member to go or council members, that would be an individual matter that those council members would need to, if they choose to accept, report individually.
May I just add just a comment to that? To make the distinction, I know Councilmember Shahal, you've attended events where you've presented a certificate of recognition from the council, from your district. And in that case, if you're attending a dinner that you're invited and you're actually presenting a certificate on behalf of the city, you would have to look at the FPPC fact sheet, but on page 5 of 14 of the fact sheet in your packet, it does say the ceremonial role. So if there's a ceremonial role in your presence as a council member for a ticketed event for a dinner, but as long as you're making a speech or you're doing a presentation, that it would be exempt as a gift. But that's if you were doing it as a council member with the ceremonial role.
Okay. Member Park, do you have any questions?
Well, I have a lot of questions and comments. I mean, first of all, we've got the House Ethics Committee that has also guidelines on gifts and tickets. I'll wait till the discussions are done if you. I mean, and I look at those quite often. Again, I want to make sure that you hear the questions and hear the comments. I mean, I'm hearing that these are for tickets that are given to the city directly. The city would distribute the tickets. I think that anything that's not given to the city to distribute would be under the gift policy. Gift policy talks about a lot of different things, such as, well, tickets that are not acceptable are ones that are designated to specific people. Know that there are a number of issues, there are a number of events, and the city manager and I were talking about one that as we were coming into this meeting, where one council member or the mayor is explicitly invited. And I think at some point, those need to be disclosed, regardless of of what happens. I mean, we talk about, the ethics committee talks about regularly scheduled meetings, constituent groups, community organizations, the role of the official at different events, talks about alignment of purposes, talks about whether or not, I mean, for example, if it's a ticket for an event that's not sold out, If it's for purely entertainment purposes, that's disallowed. I mean, if there isn't a designation for why an official would be there, I mean, there are lots of things in there that I think we can learn from. And again, it's almost to the point where I feel we should adopt the good policies that are there, rather than come up with specific policies of our own. I mean, when I looked at this, because I tried to prepare for some of these meetings, I don't prepare as well as I'd like to for all of them. But for some of them, I look into what we're talking about, and there's a lot of material out there. There's a lot of different material out there. And rather than create more different material, I'd like to pick something that I think is generally well received, generally, well understood. But for the city, I agree. I think that we should have policies that allow staff members to attend events that other cities participate in. I think that there should be nothing here that limits city staff or city involvement for events that other cities send representatives without thought. I think that that's one of the problems that we have here, which is we are so concerned about specific things that we're not thinking about how that limits the city. I remember when I first got elected in 2021, I went to an event for the county, at the county level. And the first thing that they asked me is what city I was from. And I said, Santa Clara. They said, Santa Clara County. And I said, Santa Clara City. And they said, oh, really? And later I learned that we never went to events. We had never gone to events, that they were surprised that we were there because we had not been to a single one of these events. And this was a county supervisor that was talking to me. I would like to make this not the case. I try to go to as many events as I can just to make it clear that yes, Santa Clara is active and it's involved. And I'd like to see policies that enable us to do that without, if there are gift disclosures, we'll follow those gift disclosures. But for tickets that are given, I think to refuse them, to not have a seat at the table that we are being offered, I'd like to find ways to accept as many invitations as possible, as opposed to outright deny them because we have a policy that's undefined or we're trying to be too careful. Thank you.
Okay, yes.
If I can, Councilmember Park, I wholeheartedly agree. And the ticketing policy was meant to do just that. It was meant to align to some of the best practice examples out there. And what the city attorney and I was conferring on was a little bit connected to what you were saying, but also connected to committee member Jahal's comment about ceremonial events, because we recall that oftentimes when council members go to ceremonial events, they oftentimes leave right after, right? Because they don't want to be accused of staying there after the duty is done. And so we actually looked at the FPPC rules, and 8 under ceremonial, it says that, very explicitly that council members can stay and partake in things such as a free meal, and it includes the official and one guest. And they actually give the example of throwing out a pitch at a Dodgers game. But in order for you to do that, the organization needs to comply with FPPC rules and fill out the 802 form.
And that's the key. Like I said, if it comes to you individually, you've got that analysis yourself individually, but it comes through the city under this policy, it may qualify for the ceremonial role.
And what we're not doing right now is that 802 form on a consistent basis, and this policy will provide the guidelines for us to do that.
And I think as the presentation pointed out, our ability to do that requires a policy like this. We cannot simply file an 802 form unless we have a policy that designates an administrator, identifies what the public purposes are, assures that there's a responsibility for follow-up. So back to Member Park's point, this is how we get to a point where that can be normalized and managed appropriately.
Okay. Anyone have any other? Yes, Member Chao.
So I know we are formalizing this thing right now. For the individual ones, when ceremonial items, basically, does it make sense that when we ask for a recognition or ceremonial plaque from the city, that time we inform the council staff should inform the city manager, hey, they're going for there. So in future, I'm talking about that, please file 801, 802 form for that. Like, we will formalize this thing.
Right. We actually would set it up where you don't have to inform
Okay.
staff to file the
Yeah, yeah.
802. It will be a part of our normal practice, but the city would be the recipient. And so, for example, if you're provided with someone that reaches out saying, hey, we would like you to attend, we would have a practice where you turn that over to staff in the mayor and council's office, and we would implement the policy and be very clear that it cannot be designated to one individual. And we would always seek to have enough tickets where the full council could go, would be our standard practice.
Yeah, I have a number of questions. I think the tricky part is figuring out the value of events. I mean, I had to specifically go to Ruth Shikata about the host committee event and say, what is the value of it? And they had to scramble to try to come up with a value for that. And I don't know how other agencies deal with that when they do their 802s. Certainly, when there is a ticketed event and you know what the ticket cost is, that's easy, right? But it's even more complicated than that. For example, the SEVA event is a gala, all right? And the ticketed event is $250, but the event doesn't cost $250 because it's a fundraiser. So a portion of that is the actual cost. And so we need to be clear about what number you need to record as the value of that event, because now, you know, if you're getting a free ticket, really the only cost is the incremental cost, which is the food and maybe the venue rental or whatever to the agency. And I understand that if it's truly a nonprofit, it's kind of covered because a nonprofit is giving you, they're the ones offering you the ticket as opposed to a developer buying a ticket and giving it to you. I understand that distinction. In terms of, this came up years ago when the 49ers or Manco, they had events at the stadium where they really were not filling the stadium. And rather than have an empty stadium, which kind of looked bad, they would give out free tickets. And they would give them out to community groups. And I think the city got involved with helping that. And then the issue came up with, well, who's paying the ticket surcharge? Because it's a free ticket and normally the ticket surcharge is paid by the person buying the ticket. But there were council members that insisted that the 49ers pay the $4 ticket surcharge. So we might need to resolve that at some point to figure out what we do with the free tickets. I like the idea of getting the free tickets and then through a lottery system with the city employees or community groups to give those tickets to our employees or city groups, nonprofits. And I don't know what the 49ers do currently. This came up years ago. I don't know what's happening these days. I want to go back to the example of the joint venture Silicon Valley experience that I had, which is SVP will buy a couple of tables there. And as a planning commissioner, I would like to go to that event. And the city didn't exactly coordinate with SVP. And so there was empty tables there and I still bought a ticket, right? So, but I go to a lot of events and I see on the board when they talk about sponsors, I almost never see Santa Clara as a sponsor of events. And we want to, as Member Park said, we want to be out there promoting the city as, you know, sponsoring organizations in the community. So we need to come up with a procedure, or if we buy a table, how do we make sure that table is full? You know, first go to the key employees that need to be there, and then it would go to council members. I know there's a priority list, and then it would go to other staff members or community members or whatever to fill those tables. And so I don't know how we get to a policy for that, you know, how we actively try to sponsor more events and fill those tables. What is the policy for that? Then Cupertino has an interesting thing where each council member gets a budget. I think it's like $2,000 that they can spend to go get tickets, to buy tickets to galas or whatever they're going to do. So that it doesn't come out of their own pockets, but they're representing the city at these events. Something to maybe consider. The thing that is, we can talk to Cupertino or something about what their policy is, perhaps. But it encourages council members who, you know, may be struggling financially to still go to events where they can't buy the tickets themselves. And it would be pretty much only for nonprofits. You could go to a gala that a nonprofit is doing. The tricky thing is the 49er training event. So the 49ers, I guess, invited the entire council to go to that event. I don't know if some people bought tickets to that, so there was a value to that, but clearly there's a value to that event. And I don't even know how to disclose that because it's not I don't think it's officially a ticketed event. I know I've seen Supervisor Ellenberg there many times. Well, I've only been once, but she has expressed that she goes pretty much every time. So I wanted to know how an event like that is valued and if it's not even a ticketed event. Does that come under this policy or the gift policy? And of course, the 49ers are lobbyists, so they shouldn't be giving us anything. I mean, they're prohibited from giving us a dime. So how is that covered if there's a value to that? That's pretty much all I had. And the other thing is, what I like is what the FPPC does, is they put in concrete examples. So our policy just outlines the policy, but it would be like, here's an example of joint venture, you know, like you said, throwing the pitch at Dodger stadiums. Having some concrete examples in our policies makes them much clearer. So, thank you.
Just to supplement, I think City of Sunnyvale also has individual council member budgets.
No budgets.
Yes, and I'm not sure what for those are, but they have, if the staff is looking into those things, they can also look at City of Sunnyvale too.
Yeah, okay, very good. Member Park, do you have any comments?
I was going to say that almost every ethics policy, almost every gift policy that I've seen has concrete examples in there. They tell you what's permissible, what's impermissible. These are the things that that make this impermissible, and these are the examples of things. I think that's a very good idea. I also have brought up, and I'm looking through my notes about, we moved to districts for voting, but we never actually made districts formal in the city, which means we didn't until recently have a consistent communication method. We still don't have, well, we have a little bit more of a consistent email list so that when our terms are over, the next person that comes in will have consistent lists. But we didn't have ways that we could acknowledge different community groups. I mean, we still have this city acknowledgement. But I think that we need to think about what it means to have separate districts, And I think that having a budget for each member or each district would be a good thing. I know that Sunnyvale and Cupertino have had this for a long time. They designate different neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods can apply for funding or some kind of budget, and they can spend that for newsletters, for whatever they need to do. And it's kind of unbelievable to me that Santa Clara did none of this. I mean, Sunnyvale moved to districts because of Santa Clara, and Sunnyvale understood that moving to districts meant more than just this is the way that we vote. Again, I would like to see a little bit more consideration there, but all the comments that I've heard, very good. We need to get out of 2018 and live in the now.
And if I might, city managers indulged me knowing I need to take off. There's a couple of those questions that I'll answer, and then I'll take my leave and leave you to your own good behavior. Member Jane, you asked, you identified again, one of the tricks being how to value these events. And I will point out that where it is a ticket that the city receives under this policy and is distributed, the gift limit we're exempt from the gift limit. So in other words, so you don't personally have to value those events. We may need to disclose as part of our form, what the valuation is, but that's not something you need to worry about as a, yes, I can do it. No, I can't. I have to disclose it personally. That's all something that's subsumed, within our implementation of policy 802. You also talked about the surcharge and the relationship, between, tickets and then the surcharges. As you know, there's two, in effect, surcharges. One is the $4, now $8, right, for non-NFL event. The other is the 10% of NFL event, for all tickets for NFL games. All of those amounts are collected only on tickets sold. So if there were tickets that were given away, they would be exempt under our existing, agreements from having to pay that surcharge. So a little bit of a trade-off, right? If we're getting free tickets, we're not getting the surcharge associated with that, either in the NFL game context or in the surcharge context. So I think those were ones that were directly from me. I'll take my leave, obviously available to answer questions after, but not for the rest of this meeting. Thanks.
City manager, do you
Sure.
have?
All good questions. I think a number are captured in the policy. I wanted to make the note about the value of the ticket versus the actual reportable value. And Chair Jane mentioned fundraisers, the ticket value is oftentimes much higher than the actual cost. And so as the city attorney noted, for the 802 form, staff will handle the administration of the 802 form and all of those requirements. We can, though, support council with some sample language that you can send when you are accepting a ticket that will ask that question in detail that you can send out earlier. I totally understand that at the event asking that question, I've had to do that myself, is oftentimes a hard question for them to answer. And then the person that's really the host there is scrambling, oftentimes calling somebody back at their central office to try and find out what's the actual value. And so we can certainly support you with that answer. Councilmember Jane also mentioned SVP tickets, and you provided one example. There's another example, which is Silicon Valley Power sponsors the annual new car show at the convention center and receives approximately 200 tickets because of their sponsorship. Right now, there's a process to provide those to the public, but those have not been provided to council on I think over the last 2 years, certainly, but maybe in the past. I'm not knowledgeable about that, but certainly with regard to how that's distributed with a policy like this, we will set up CMDs, so city manager directives that will outline the full policy for ticket administration, and certainly will provide those procedures to the committee and the council. With regard to Cupertino, have noted Cupertino's budgeting process, which is providing specific funds to council members or for district administration. I think the council members are right. Santa Clara has not historically done that. I think how we have handled that, right or wrong, or could be a policy change, is that we have provided not individual funds for those, but collective funds. For example, one of the things that we have here that I'm not sure other cities have, but is a community grants program where we provide grants of up to $10,000 for very community groups to fund things like that. It's not segmented by district or by council member, but it is something that's citywide. And you may recall, we recently adjusted the policy and the practice around how those funds are distributed to make sure that more people in the community know about it and can receive those funds. Also, we have, through the mayor and council budget, a collective budget that is used for items. What comes to mind for me is conferences, right? We don't have a budget for an individual council member to attend conferences, but we do have a conference and travel budget. And that is utilized because sometimes a council member is going to, let's say, an overseas thing that may cost more than a conference in California, right? And so staff's job is to manage that entire budget. And I think we've successfully done that and have been able to facilitate council members going to events that are of value, that have a nexus to the policy role that the council member is serving, but we haven't capped it at a certain amount per council member or per district. Certainly, as a policy, we can do that. I also think that there is some beneficial flexibility in having a council-wide budget that's administered by staff. And certainly, if council members are feeling that there's not enough funds there for them to do what they need to do or they would like to do, we can have that conversation. But that's just how we've treated it here, and we can certainly do it differently.
I believe we've never hit the limit on that budget, so, yeah. For conferences and travel, we've never hit the limit. We're always well below it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We have not exhausted all the funds.
Okay, we'll go to the public now. Any member of the public?
Yes, we have Wanda Buck.
Hi, your one citizen feedback. I have to say, I appreciate all your good intentions and that I do, and I think it's pretty obvious in the city that our elected officials are overworked and underpaid. And staff, the extra hours that they have because of the long meetings and so much to cover. It seems to me that this is small money and that you shouldn't have to worry about value. That as a citizen, I expect to see our elected officials at events and going to events so that they know what's going on in our city and what's good and bad for us. In fact, I wonder when I don't see someone there why they aren't. I know you only have so many hours. So I think that when we look at other places that have been mentioned that have like 600 or something, that it's underneath that amount, that it's okay. I do think disclosure written someplace where the public, can know what happens is fine. But I think it's a lot of time. It's that you all having to spend on all these details, that it could be simplified by allowing larger amounts. And I can't remember all the things that I want to say, and I know I'm only supposed to have 2 minutes, but just try and make it easier so that an elected official can go to everything, and it's all relatively financially. I mean, you guys are eating up your salary at events if you go to all the things you want. So I wish you the best.
Thank you, Wanda. Any other members?
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, well, that concludes this item. I guess staff is asking for approval or a motion on this. I'm wondering, we made a number of changes. There's things to look at. Do you want to come back or do you want us to just make amendments to this? I can't actually come up with an amendment.
Yeah. In tracking the conversation specific to the ticket policy, I did not hear an amendment to the policy that's proposed. It certainly covers and provides specific examples for types of tickets that are envisioned. It covers the 802 form that does have a dollar value that is required that staff would administer. It provides for a ticket administrator, which the city manager. So I do think if the committee is willing to act to refer this to the city council, I haven't heard any specific requests for changes to the proposed policy.
I think there were ideas around maybe a budget for council members to be able to pay for events. I think there were some ideas about how to handle those free tickets that we, what is the policy? Is it a lottery, or how are we going to distribute those free tickets?
Sorry, my mic was not on. In regard to a budget for purchasing tickets, wouldn't be covered under this policy because this policy is envisioned for tickets that are provided to the city that are complimentary, or tickets that we would purchase, but that purchase would be a citywide purchase under budgeted funds, or if it was a significant amount, an amount that would need to be approved by the city council. So certainly during our budgeting process, we can discuss creating individual district budgets that could be used for any number of things. We can bring that back prior to the budget season as a discussion here. If council wanted policy around that, we can really do that either way. We can handle it through the budget process, or we can have a conversation here that makes its way to council. I think in regard to free tickets, I think that that's covered, and the city attorney clarified for things at the stadium, ticket surcharge would not apply.
Yeah, the last thing would be like, if, as Member Chahal said, the Indian consulate invited us to an event. It's a ticketed event and they only invited a couple of council members. How would that be handled?
Let me clarify. So those are not ticketed events. They don't charge any ticket, but they are on invitation only, but they do serve lunch or dinner out there. That's my point. They are not ticketed events. Yeah.
So would we report those in our Form 700s?
Yes, and so how the policy is envisioned, anything that the council member receives that is a ticket or a gift would be individual reporting, Form 700, or report out at a city council member meeting as our policy envisions. With regard to a provider of a ticket requesting that a specific council member comes, what the current proposed ticket policy does is it precludes that. It says that they cannot designate a specific person. That is a local, that would be a local requirement. It is worth noting though, that on the 802 form, it does provide for clarifying, was the ticket distribution made at the behest of the elected, of the agency official, which is slightly different. And so we would have to note that. But we would seek in the policy to exempt a provider from designating, for example, that that they're providing a ticket to Councilmember Jahal, and we would say, you know what, that's a gift to Councilmember Jahal. You're certainly able to do that, but Councilmember Jahal would need to report that.
Well, let's say SVP buys a ticket to a power conference. I'm the NCPA representative. Member Chahal is the alternate, and maybe they invite only two of us. So how is that handled?
With this policy, city staff would have to develop a series of procedures for how it would be administered. In that instance, what we would do is the policy would designate which council members we go to first. And it could very well be the fact that if there is a council member that serves on a board and commission related to that event, they're provided with a offer of a ticket before other council members. We can certainly include that in the procedures. The committee could direct us to come back and include provisions in the policy to clarify that in the order in which tickets would be offered. So
I think the same would apply to Karen Hardy, who's very involved in water things. If she went to an event that was sponsored by our Public Works Department or something.
So for example, if the city purchased a table and the department head was going, other key staff was going, and there were only 3 tickets left for council members, what you're asking for is that the council member that serves on a policy committee be one of those that is first provided with the ticket. Certainly, we can either do that through staff procedure or council policy. You could propose an amendment that when this comes back to council, that we include a procedure for distributing tickets to council members based on policy assignments. We can certainly do that.
I guess I would like to see that. You know, if there's a limited number of tickets and you can't support all the council members, then the council members that are on committees most related to that activity should be offered the tickets first.
Sure. We can do that. Just asking for clarification. I'm assuming what you're saying is it would be the committee member and the alternate, and then we would go mayor, vice mayor? Or
Yeah, I guess that would be fine with me.
straightforward.
Okay, so that, I guess, would be the only amendment that we're making at this point. Member Park.
So I want to differentiate, like, these are not necessarily open tickets. I think that agencies give tickets to agency members. The fact that Jane and Shahal may be the members that are offered tickets is not really the point. I think that in some cases, it's like, well, not anyone can come. The reason that we're inviting you, even though it's you in particular, is because you're an agency member or you're a committee member. And it's open to all committee members, but not everyone on council is a committee member. Like, as soon as you say, we want a policy where we, have a distribution policy based on council assignments and then to the rest of council, doesn't make any sense to me. I think at some point we have to look at what the agency requirements or what the agency policies are as well. I mean, for example, if I wanted to go to Cities Association, I can't necessarily just go to Cities Association unless it's a kind of an open event. I think that there are some events that require membership, and we need to differentiate those. It's not just because, one council member is invited. No, you're invited because you're a committee member or you are an agency member, and that's a very different thing. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, again, I apologize that, I know this policy only considers tickets that are provided to the city and the city distribution. So a lot of the discussions here, and even some that I contributed to them, not because they were germane to the item, but because they were germane to the issues that were brought up. Many of the issues that were brought up are actually gift policy issues. They're actually, they're issues outside of this. I know for Consul General, Consul General is explicitly, a Consul General of any country is explicitly excluded from political work. So it's not a lobbyist or things like this. That's we must consider that a little bit separately because it's more about community. It's very specific. It is apolitical, or we're going to have problems at the international level. Right. For invitations, again, I've read so many different policies that talk about what the intents are. And if the intents are that somebody gets a benefit, if it's for entertainment purposes, yes. But if the intents are, well, we need this kind of representation, we want people to come, that's a different kind of consideration. And rather than come up with all the different types of things that we do, I would like to refer to the speaker, to the public speaker, and say, we need to simplify this so that we can make things, so we're not spending so much time on, well, what happened? How do we distribute this? How do we distribute that? At some point, I think that identifying a ticket administrator and saying the ticket administrator will define a process to do this, that's fine. I don't know that we need to call that out specifically in this policy. Right. In fact, I like not calling it out so that specific cases or things that aren't handled by a specific policy can be done without having to go back to council, without having to rethink a policy. I like things to be open-ended. I'd like to give agency to the people who have the responsibility, right? Again, that comes with a little bit of trust. And maybe, if anything, I'd like to see a report of the tickets that were distributed, how are they distributed? And if anything, see how many people complained about this distribution. I'd just like to make that transparent. But to say that we want to lay out the details of distribution and this, that's not the kind of policy I'd like to see. I think, so anyways, I hear the committee, I hear the comments. I'd like to back off on some of the details, the implementation details. I think that it's understood by staff. I think that this policy does cover the things that I would expect to see on tickets that are given to the city. I think that it was a good thing because it helped me differentiate in my mind the issues that the city has in accepting tickets. I think that we also touched on in the gift policy, what happens when the city receives a gift? I mean, for example, when I went to Ichun for the Ceramic Festival, I received a gift on behalf of the Sister Cities Association. Like, it was not to me. And the reason that we did that is all the other sister cities that were in attendance received those gifts on behalf of their organizations, not on behalf of the people that came. And I think that we need to think about those kinds of things outside of the city ticket policy. I will make a motion to accept the staff recommendation as is. I don't know that we need amendments. If somebody wants to fight for an amendment, I'm welcome to hear that.
I think I made the amendment, so I made the motion with the amendment. So is there a second?
Can you restate your amendment?
The amendment is if a city department were to purchase a table at an event and there was a limited number of spots, the preference of those spots would be to council members who are on committees related to that work of that department.
I make a suggestion. I wouldn't limit it to a department or if the ticket is purchased. I would say if the city receives a ticket and it's for a event that has a nexus or alignment to a council member's appointed policy board or commission, that council member be given a priority.
I'm fine with that. That's my motion.
And if I will, Committee Member Park mentioned a host of other procedures, and absolutely, this policy envisions that staff would develop those procedures, and they're not in the policy. We will certainly do that. We will provide copies to the committee and the council. Also want to note that the policy provides that all 802 forms that the city fills out must be published on our website. And so that public transparency and reporting is built in.
I can second accepting the priority amendment, essentially a priority amendment that Chair Jane has proposed.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, passes unanimously. All right, is there a staff report?
No additional.
Yes, I just wanted to add a staff report from last governance and ethics meeting in September. Last committee meeting, Councilmember Park, you had a few questions. At the last committee meeting regarding your question that the city State of the City for 2024 that was not held. You had some questions on the follow-up that was raised on the October 22nd council meeting. The city did return to the council with a full report on November 14th, 2024, regarding the planning of the State of the City in 2024 and the potential outside host that was being considered that year that did not transpire. So there is a link to that report that I could share with the committee. The second thing Committee Member Park raised at the last meeting was the city website page to correct media reporting on issues related to council. On our city website, we do have a webpage for media corrections and clarifications. And on that webpage, it does have a clause that says, beginning in 2024, the city created this webpage as a repository for corrections and requested retractions or clarifications to articles released by the media outlets. And the page focuses on information related to city business. And this is not a platform that addresses any information regarding elected officials or political opinions. And then lastly, Councilmember Park, you brought up at the last meeting, whether mayor and council emails should be automatically set to forward, and that your recollection was this was voted on. Looking back at the council minutes, it was not voted on for action, but if the committee wanted to refer this back to be looked at, I just wanted to note that.
And if I can, with that, staff is working on a revision to the communications memo that will include a section on how mayor and council emails are distributed. Certainly, it is our practice to forward any emails to the council. There's a process for that. They do go to staff first. If there is a sensitive matter, we do attempt to send that to you via a confidential medium, whether that is either rebadged in an email that says confidential on Intralinks, or if it is relating to an ongoing matter, whether it's negotiations or a legal settlement, we would bring that up in closed session. And so there is a process for that. We are codifying that process. I do know that there are a number of questions about prior communications that did not go. In fact, I had a conversation with Councilmember Park earlier today, and I asked him to send me that communication directly so that as a city manager, I could look into it and see if we followed our practice appropriately.
Okay. All right, now we'll move on to, Member Park. Go ahead.
So yes, I did receive from staff members the report on the state of the city for 2024. I noted that I did not hear this, and it's because the 14th November 2024 meeting, I left early because I was attending a conference. So I was probably in flight when that happened, because it happened very late. So I reviewed the minutes, I reviewed the notes, and I'm going to say that although it talks about why this happened, it doesn't give justification of why the mayor was allowed to do this. I mean, it sounds like it was just dropped, that it was being planned, there was a date set. Then the mayor said, oh, I'd like to do it a little bit differently this year. I'd like to have an outside sponsor. I'd like to do different things. And then things just dropped. And to say that that was the reason why it happened, that's one thing. But to say that reason is acceptable, holy cow, that's not acceptable. Because there were other things that were also dropped, including district awards didn't happen. Like the fact that we had a State of the City meeting or not should not preclude giving out something that for years have become standard as part of our community, like the district awards. So I think there's more to the story than simply saying that, well, it didn't happen because we couldn't find a venue. Because we had a venue. We decided to allow one person to unilaterally change that process and therefore delay it to a point where we just forgot about it. In fact, the report basically says, well, we never got back to this and therefore we never had the event. That is not acceptable to me or to the people that complain about this. Like I'd almost forgotten about this until people complained to me about this. I mean, it's true. People complain about ethics all the time, but it's not necessarily the people on this committee that are the subject of the ethics complaints that I'm hearing about. So that's the first thing. I would like a fuller report on why this happened. Like the fact what happened, that's a very different thing, but why this happened, why this was allowed, I think we need a little bit more investigation on that from an ethics and governance point of view. Like we talk about this all the time. Mayor is not a strong mayor, and yet we give the mayor all the backing and support they need to do things that are not supported by this city. I mean, I'll note in governance and ethics, Anytime a council member wants to do something, we're often disallowed from doing that because there is not a specific charter reason to allow that. But when the mayor wants to do something, we often say, well, there is no specific charter amendment that disallows that, or this is the way it's done traditionally in other cities. And I think that this doublespeak, this duality, and how we look at things is not acceptable. Like at some point, we accept that we have a mayor and council, and the mayor has specific duties as chair of the meetings, as maybe the spokesperson for city things, but not on everything. And they cannot unilaterally go out and write letters to the governor and council state of the city events. Like we really seriously need to look at this. If we're going to look at ethics at all, we need to look at ethics, not just at what the city council members do, but how staff supports city council members in the different capacities that we have. There should be no, we talk about no kings. There are no kings or queens in the city either, right? The fact that we talk about, well, we would like council members that are related to the events, related to the tickets, to the agencies, that's fine. I mean, we have a lot of sister cities events that go without sister cities or the council member that's a sister city liaison, even being informed about these kinds of things. And these are the kinds of biases that we really need to look at and we really need to address. When we talk about media reporting, there are a lot of things that we're attacking the police. That is not a political thing. They're not attacking the police chief, they're attacking the police. There are lies that are happening. There are accusations being made that, well, Councilmember Jane did a few things. I think he's subject to a recall based on things that aren't even true. And at some point, we can say that they're
Kevin,
political.
let's stick to the,
Oh, no, but this is about the city website and correct media reporting. Like this is about that. At some point, we need to step back from our political stances as a city and say, this does hurt the city or this is a city issue. And we don't talk about that. We simply say, well, because it also includes, or it's also tangentially related to a council member, it's political and therefore we won't make a statement. And I don't think that's acceptable either. When I talk about council email being forwarded, the reason that I had asked for this, and this was on October 22nd of 2024, like I can tell you exactly when these dates are because I tell people I take good notes. The reason that I asked for this is explicit, and it just happened this year and in an issue that we're dealing with now is there are a lot of emails that people say, I sent this email back in July and I never saw it. I have seen recently emails that say, oh, sorry, I'm sending this email out late. And now it's too late to action some of the items that the original email was requesting. So at some point, we really need to fix this. I've been included on hotel reservations for another council member at very expensive hotels that maybe they shouldn't have gone to me. And we really need to think of how we use these kinds of addresses. At some point, we've got a big problem there, a communication problem. And council members are being dinged for the fact that it wasn't forwarded to us by staff or staff sent it to us late. The expectation for a lot of people sending to mayor and council is that they are sending this message is getting to all of mayor and council. The fact that it's filtered and sometimes staff says, well, we think it's only being addressed to these council members, or it only seems to make sense for these council members, so I'm only going to forward it to these council members. That's not a decision that we should make on behalf of the person that sent it. And if we are using mayor and council for other things, for example, hotel reservations, we need to think about this. We need to say, well, that is not a use that we want every council member. This is not a communication we want every council member to be part of. And therefore, maybe we need to change that. But all of these different things are I'm trying to look at how we manage or govern this. Because as somebody that has managed IT, that has managed development at operations for lots of startup companies, holy cow, there are so many holes in our process. There are so many holes in what we do that if we're going to talk about governance and ethics, if we're going to talk about these things, we need to start with a good foundation. And right now, we don't have one.
I actually agree with a lot of that. I think the public's expectation when they send a email to mayor and council should go to all the council members and the mayor. There should be a separate email for council support staff that then we would use, and it would go to all the council support staff.
If I can, a couple of those things. I think one of the things we talk about a lot is we want to limit policy to where policy is needed and have appropriate internal procedures for other things. I do think that this is something that's more appropriate for internal procedures. I do agree that there's improvement needed in the process. Know that staff is working on that. My ask of the committee is we will finalize those procedural changes, provide them to the council. And if in fact, after that, you think that we need policy to govern it, then I think it would be appropriate to go down that path. With regard to the state of the city for 2024, I do think that we've provided a articulation of what occurred. I will only say in addition that in my professional experience, a state of the city is inherently in most cities a ceremonial item, and it is typically the mayor's state of the city. I think in cities when if the mayor says, hey, I'd like to do the state of the city different this year, most agencies would certainly work with the mayor to do the state of the city differently. I think what happened in this case is the mayor stated that, hey, I would like to do the state of the city differently. I would like to partner with an outside agency, and that never materialized, right? I think that people have concerns or questions on why that didn't materialize, but I do maintain that staff's implementation essentially of the state of the city process aligns to what other cities would do in a similar situation. Now, that said, also note that we have a practice here where there are district awards given at the state of the city. And so because the state of the city didn't occur, those district awards did not occur. I do think that there's a relatively straightforward process here. And again, I want to say, as I said before, we don't always need policy, but sometimes I actually think in this case, maybe we do need policy, and the policy could be very simple, simply to direct staff that there should be a state of the city or similar program that provides for district awards each year, right? That would still allow the mayor, whoever the mayor is at that time, that says, hey, I want to give my state of the city address in a different fashion to do that. But it would provide direction to staff that, you know what, you should still have a city event where there are district awards, right? I think that both respects the ceremonial role of the mayor and the mayor's ability to provide a mayoral state of the city, but also would prevent a mayor for whatever reason not having a state of the city, thus not having district awards, right? And I think we would seek to always have them combined. But if in fact the mayor doesn't have a state of the city, we would have a city ran program where council member provides district awards. I think that's a resolution to this. And I understand that, what happened in 2024 meant that district awards were not provided, and certainly know that that was not the intention of staff.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah, I think you completely ignored the second half of what I was talking about there, which is you're trying to treat the mayor differently without charter support. And you just said it. You said, well, staff in any other city would have been in your professional experience. Well, in your professional experience, my professional experience, I have seen that council members are allowed lots of simple things, being able to speak at city events without a council policy. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I'm allowed to speak at city events for other cities more often than I'm allowed to speak at city events for the city of Santa Clara, the city that I represent. And in order to do that, you literally told us when we had this meeting that we had to put a policy in place because, one, it was not allowed by the charter. And now you're turning around and telling me, well, the mayor can do all these different things because it's not explicitly disallowed by the charter. And I'm saying this kind of thinking has to stop. At some point, if you look at what the mayor's powers are in the charter, look at them. We discussed them here, and I've had the city attorney tell me that, oh, the mayor can do this, the mayor can do this. And I read into the record, I don't see where the mayor is allowed to do this. Like, this duality, this treating the mayor separately is not supported, and yet you're telling me in your professional experience, it should be allowed. And what council members, do in other cities should not be allowed. No, I do not accept that. Like, you either make it consistent for all, or, you change it so that things are unfair officially. But no, this issue has been pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. This issue was actually brought up in 2021. I can tell you the date. The issue that I brought up last year, brought up in the October 22nd meeting, 2024. It is over a year later. And we're still, from the last meeting where we discussed this, and we're still at this point of, well, the mayor can do whatever they want because this is what my professional experience is in other cities. And council members cannot do that because, well, it's not explicitly allowed by the charter. This is ridiculous. And now, in this meeting, we are considering gift policy, which is in fact very important, ticket policy, which is in fact very important, but so many foundational issues about governance and ethics are not being addressed. I mean, we had a public member asking about an ethics committee, which has been going on. This discussion is going on for at least 3 years. And whether I agree with the ethics committee or commission or not, I think that there's a lot of relevance in their concern, which is our time is being used on these kinds of small things, and the foundational issues are just being pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. And when you tell me, maybe we need a policy here for allowing a state of the city, and the fact that in other cities, other jurisdictions, it is a ceremonial thing run by the mayor, I'm sorry. You can't say that. You can't say that and tell us that we need a policy for all the things that are ceremonial, that are accepted in every other jurisdiction, and then not have that policy for somebody else. And then you're asking us to, well, let's formalize the difference in what the mayor can do, instead of saying, well, let's look at the charter and say, this is what it's done. This is what's allowed. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I want to call out the city manager on the floor for this discrepancy. This is not the way the city charter is. This is not the way the city is. And the fact that you're trying to mold it we're trying to put into policy things that have changed recently in recent years doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, at some point, you're right. We have a lot of things to discuss. These things that we've discussed, the travel policy, these things, very important, that's true. But there are so many more important foundational things that have been put off for years that we are not discussing. And I think that those things would also help with the travel policy, with the gift policy. That's what this is supposed to be. And at some point, if we need more meetings to do this, I heard that the marketing committee is meeting every other week. Maybe that's required, but we've got so many things and so many more important things in front of us that I'd like to see on an agenda. I'd like to see how we manage these meetings. Then maybe we need to see more meetings.
Kevin, I'll let the city manager respond if you'd like to, but we're going late, Kevin, and these were, I know we're discussing this, but they were not agendized. We have the charter review, which is looking at the charter. There's other things. This is a special meeting that we called to basically cover things that we didn't have time to do. We might need more special meetings, but that's, we need to have a work plan and go through that discussion. So I'll let the city manager.
No, thank you, Chair Jane. And you really said what I was getting ready to say, which is if there's a desire to clarify the ceremonial role of the mayor, we now have an appropriate venue for that. And we have a charter review commission and the city attorney is leading that effort. There are subcommittees that are looking at every section of the charter. I will also just say, again, it is my professional opinion that the state of the city is a ceremonial event. And the mayor, through the charter, is the ceremonial head of the city. I will also say that it's important to note that the mayor did not request to cancel the state of the city address. She instructed staff that she would like to hold the state of the city in a different manner, and that did not occur. I recognize that because staff did not go back and ensure that some event occurred, it meant that district awards did not occur. right? And I do think that that is the major concern that was mentioned in 2024 is that there was not an event that allowed council members to provide district awards, and that is typically done at the State of the City address, right? I do think, though, that the council member has brought up an important point, right? Which is if the mayor decides not to do a state of the city, right? That's not what our current mayor did. But if the mayor says, you know what, I don't want to do a state of the city, staff needs some guidance on that. And again, in my professional opinion, most city staffs would say, okay, well, the state of the city is a ceremonial event. And if the mayor doesn't want to do the state of the city, we're not going to have one, right? Now, in this case, that would mean that you don't get to do your district awards, right? And we do need to, I think, grapple with that, which is why we were having the conversation.
Okay. Do you have a comment? Okay. Are there any referrals or committee member reports? I don't have one. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.